what it's kind of speaking to is, just how much you are embodying something so that either someone remembers their specialness, or just by being in proximity with you, they start to remember it. Right.
Right.
And again, even just listening to this conversation, whether you're watching it on YouTube, you're listening in the car, wherever, maybe there's a certain quality to the energy that you're experiencing here. So yeah, how did you stumble upon this, or is this something that you were taught, or what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a really special kind of ecosystem. My parents, in many ways, certainly attracted to each other for a certain reason, but they were also like polar opposites. So my mom was a music teacher. She was my Catholic school, grade school music teacher. And my dad worked for NASA. His job was to keep satellites afloat and taking photos of the Earth, way back before, personal computers and Google Maps. It's like everyone kind of takes that for granted. And my dad was on this cutting edge of science and space. And so, it's like music and, research scientist. And at the same time, crazy enough, they both grew up in this very small town in Kansas called Manhattan, Kansas. They affectionately refer to as the Little Apple, which I'm sure New Yorkers are just like, what? And so my dad was like an only child on a farm in the 30s, like Dust Bowl, Kansas, only child. Like that just seems like the worst possible scenario to grow up in.
I've read Grapes of Wrath. Right. That's what I'm imagining.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Totally. Like that's my dad. Right. So,
Yeah.
And both of them love music. So my dad was a musician also. They met in high school band. And he also was smart enough to know that he couldn't make any money doing music. And so he asked his music teacher, like, hey, I want to do music, but I don't want to farm. That's what I know. I don't want to farm. And his teacher said, like, well, you could become an engineer because music has a lot of like mathematics in it and you're really good at it. So consider that. So sure enough, my dad takes the path of engineering. He becomes the first to graduate from Kansas State University with a PhD in electrical engineering and is scooped up in Northern California, like before the birth of Silicon Valley, by NASA at Ames Research Center. So I was born in 1968. And I like to say that I was basically kind of born with and in the frequency of Silicon Valley as it was exploding. So literally Apple, Hewlett Packard, IBM, all those things were just like around the corner. Those were the garages, in the cul-de-sacs from which I lived and grew up in. So there's all of that. And then there's also the fact that my parents were into some really weird shit. So like this is like 70s California, but it wasn't like Grateful Dead drugs 70s California, although that was just like a hop, skip, jump away. They were into, so for instance, a lot of people these days know what Reiki is, right? And so when I was 7 years old, Reiki is basically a Japanese art form of hands-on healing that's become very popular. Of course, I say many people know what Reiki is these days. And of course, I live in Asheville, North Carolina. So, everyone.
Yeah. Many people who we talk to regularly know what Reiki
That's
is.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. In the slice of humanity that we have conversations with. So anyways, I received Reiki. I learned Reiki from the woman who brought Reiki from Japan to Hawaii to Northern California. And I was probably one of the first 100 people in the world at the age of 6 years old to receive Reiki. And, she was a powerful badass. She was like, I remember her. I mean, I was a tiny little kid and she was tiny. She was probably less than 5 feet tall, but she was this powerful woman and I could feel it. I could sense it. Like I knew adults. And then here was this woman before me who had this something extra. And so at a very young age, I was like, what is that? Like I'm in the room and she's like talking to me like I'm a conscious, woke adult. Like she's not talking to me like I'm 7 years old. She's like, she kind of had the same, like, I think I was gifted that like, if you're before me, you must be important. You know what I mean? From that moment, I'm kind of getting that in this moment. Like, I think she was thinking like, hey, you're a little kid. I don't care if you're 7. Like, if you're before me, you're important. So here we go. And that moment, imprinted me. It impacted me.
Mm.
Later that year, I would go to Japan and receive private lessons from Dr. Suzuki, um, who I'm sure you know because you're a
Yeah.
consummate musician. And
Amazing.
so I have black and white photos of me as a little redhead kid. You can't see the red because of the black and white, but I've got this bowl haircut. And I'm sitting there playing cello with Dr. Suzuki over me. So I had these experiences. Then I learned transcendental meditation when I was 8. My dad was best friends with chiropractors. I decided I wanted to be a chiropractor by the age of 9. All these things, which of course, later down the road, I was like, I don't want to be a chiropractor, because every time I would tell someone I wanted to be a chiropractor, they would give me this weird look like, that's a quack. And
Mm-hmm.
so I changed it to dentist until I got into college, and chiropractic and the culture caught up with chiropractic. And then I literally was in the college library and saw chiropractor as one of the top like 15 professions that you can make money at in like US news and world reports. And I was like, okay, I guess game
So
back on. Because
you were in the chiropractor closet, right? And then
I was totally closeted. Yeah. And I mean, I denied it so much that I didn't even know that is what I wanted until I had moments where I felt really lost. And I
Mm-hmm.
kind of was remembering back to like, well, what did I want to do when I was a little kid? And I was like, maybe I should just be a chiropractor. I mean, Jesus, I've like grown up around this shit my whole life. So that's what I did. And that was the beginnings
Mm-hmm.
of it all.
Well, it's certainly a fascinating kind of like origin story.
Yeah.
Mom's a musician. I can see the drum set in the background. We were kind of
Right.
jamming beforehand. We could just end the podcast now and just play you guys out for another 45 minutes of
Right. We'll
completely
just
improvised
jam.
music. Um,
Yeah.
but maybe another time we'll do that. And then your dad's a NASA engineer, right?
Right. Yeah.
Just as NASA is you know beginning to become what it would be, and then there's these cool interactions, right? Whether it's this
Mm-hmm.
woman who imprints you in this moment
Mm-hmm.
when you're
Yeah.
young, training with Dr. Suzuki, transcendental meditation, like there's there's moments, right, where you're being influenced and imprinted. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that came up, kind of an interesting question was, you worked with this Reiki master, right? This woman
Mm-hmm.
who basically brought that to the US. Anytime we're working with somebody, whether it's a coach, someone who's in healing work, someone who's an advisor, or a personal trainer, even no matter who we're working with, there's a big difference between like the slice of the pie at the top and then just like
Mm-hmm.
everyone else, right?
Yeah.
And like working with the top 1%, a top 5% sort of person.